Welcome to Chapter 9, Groups and Teams. Okay, so in this chapter, there are 5 learning outcomes. It is a relatively short chapter in comparison to previous content we've covered. So the first one is, what is the difference between groups and teams? Group formation and development process, factors that influence group behaviors and effectiveness, the various types of teams, and finally, what are the advantages and disadvantages to working as teams? Okay, so what is a group? What is a team? A group is formed whenever people interact with common interests or objectives. Often it is a group in which they distinguish themselves as we or separate from the crowd, but the distinct difference is you're responsible for your own leadership, your own accountability, and your own work products. So all of that is independent. So your interests and objectives might be same, but the way you work is different or independent of each other. A team, on the other hand, has more complementary skills. It is goal oriented. They're interdependent, meaning you need to have the other person on the team do their part or the whole system won't work. So it's very important that one of the distinctions is you're interdependent. In a group, you aren't. You have mutual accountability, meaning I'm going to do my part, but listen, you better get your part done as well, because our performance is going to be graded or gauged or evaluated together. And then they have a shared work product. So if you think of the group assignments in this course, maybe they should be called team assignments because there's a little bit of mutual accountability, there's some interdependence, and you do have a final product. Okay, this is classic work about group formation and development. It has been around for a long time because I remember studying this in university, which was a couple of years ago. So, what you have to know is in Tuckman's 5-stage model of group development, you start with forming, and that is when there is just a little bit of agreement. The purpose is kind of unclear, and you're searching for direction. You're really just starting to interact with each other. Everyone is polite, everyone is on time, and you're just trying to get to know one another. And then the next phase, which is the most interesting, I think sometimes, is this storming stage, and that's when there's a little bit of a struggle in conflict with who's in charge, who's going to do what work, and you establish maybe a little bit of behavior norms, right? That moves into the next stage, and the next stage is this norming stage. And that's when you've hashed everything out and you know who's responsible for what and what their roles are. And this stage is called norming. And that's when you start to move into the performing stage. And that's when the rubber hits the road, kind of, and the real work begins. You have a clear vision, you have a clear goal, and you start to actually get some work done. Once you've completed the work, you're going to move into the final stage, stage number 5. And listen, not everyone makes it to this stage, right? If and when the work is completed, you move into the adjourning stage, and that's when the group disbands and moves on maybe to the next project, the next team, the next class, or whatever that may look like. I found this really interesting. So, group formation and development models. So, the punctuated equilibrium model argues that there's this punctuated burst of energy or work that happens kind of halfway through the project. So you can see the effort towards the goal on one side and the time. And what it advocates is that groups take virtually the same trajectory, this type of step trajectory in development and completion of their goals. And in phase one of the project lasts approximately half of the allotted time, no matter what the time is. And at the midpoint, there's a little burst of energy, and then the second phase is completed. And what is so interesting about this, if you think about your group work, is it true? If you have 2 weeks to complete a task, does it kind of sit there for a week and then maybe halfway through that time period, there's a burst of energy and things kind of get rolling, and then you progress to stage two? I think that there's a little bit of validity here when I think of my group work and working with people, that you need a little bit of pressure to get to a point where you see the time ticking, and maybe you're not making as much progress as you want to. But both of these models, the Tuckman's 5-stage model and the punctuated equilibrium model, they're compatible. They kind of work together. And combining the two suggests that groups begin to, by forming and norming, then go through the period of low performance before they move through the final adjourning phase. So obviously adjourning would be up there in phase two in this diagram, and the first step of this model here, the forming, would be in this phase one here. So you can see how they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, these two models. Okay, group behavior. How do you behave in a group? Two factors that really affect the way behaviors are in groups, the way individuals behave, are the norms of behavior and the group cohesion. So the norms are basically what are the rules or behaviors that the group sets as standard. Everyone in the group is going to be willing to do this, and they become the benchmark in which the group members are evaluated and judged. And some of the behaviors are social, some of them are productive, some are implicit, meaning that they're not necessarily said, but everyone does it. Like maybe it's not implicit that you show up to work dressed professionally, but you do. But it is explicit, right, or formal, that you're hitting certain deadlines. So there's two types of social norms or group norms, and those are both explicit and implicit. And then group cohesion is the next factor, and that is how well a group works together. A group's productivity and how well they perform. It is kind of the interpersonal glue, right? If you're a tighter group and you work really well together, then you're typically going to perform better than one that is a bit disjointed. In a group that has high cohesion, they exert influence over each other, right? Because you want to make sure that you're remaining a part of the group, kind of in the in circle. And groups with low levels of cohesion have greater difficulty enforcing standards of behavior. So it's really important. What's also interesting is we've talked a lot about culture here. In homogeneous groups that are typically all the same, they come from the same background, they went to the same schools, they speak the same language, normally they naturally have a higher level of cohesion, right? They're normally on the same page starting from the beginning. So we do have a challenge in Canada and a lot of organizations that we don't necessarily come from homogeneous groups, right? We come from various different cultures and backgrounds and countries, and it makes it interesting and fascinating, but it also might make it more challenging when you're working in a group. Okay, what affects a group's performance? There's a number of things. The first one is the group structure. So how is the group set up? What are the tools that they have available to them? How are decisions made? How is accountability addressed? What specific roles do people have? What are limits on those roles? So what is the structure is the first variable here. The second variable is group process. So how will it be achieved? Are people cooperative towards one another, and do they have really good interpersonal working skills? Do they have good personal integrity, and are they positive? Or they may be more competitive, right? Do they typically keep to themselves? Are they worried about themselves, about their level of performance? Do they play fair? Do they, consider maybe there's a winner and a loser? So that's the group process. Like, how do they work together to achieve the goal? And the last one is the task and maintenance behaviors. And what these are what activities does the group have to complete? What are the tasks that have to be done? And then the maintenance functions are the functions of what um, what needs to be maintained within the group to keep it functioning well, right? To keep them away from negative or destructive feelings. So, what are the tasks, and what are the maintenance behaviors? What are they doing to ensure that they have a high level of cohesiveness and that the norms are being enforced, right? This is why some organizations will do huge team building projects, and go out and spend weekends doing, various things like high ropes courses and trust falls and all sorts of stuff to try to maintain those behaviors within a group. Okay, there's various types of teams based on your field, organization, um, or really what's required. So there's examples here of teams: engineering team, customer service, executives, and then permanence is how long are they going to work together. Still, skill differentiating is how different are the skills, and then authority differentiating. So those are the four variables. And on the team type, on the left-hand column here, production, service, management, project, action, and advisory. So you can see that if a team is an engineering team, normally they're together for a long time. Normally the skill differentiating is low. They possess a lot of the similar skills, and the authority differentiating is high. Um, and that means that much of the distributing or much of the decisions are distributed amongst the members, right? It isn't a top down type thing. And there's no one style of team that works best in every situation. It's just important to know that um, depending on the team, how long it's together, what the skills are, and who's making decisions, they're going to differ. And obviously, you don't need different types of teams in every situation. But based on this model and these organizations, there has emerged three different types of teams: cross-functional teams, self-managed teams, and, as we all know from COVID, virtual teams. So, what is a cross-functional team? A cross-functional team is a group of people with diverse expertise working towards a common goal. So you might not know how to do the other person's job, and they may not know how to do yours. But because you work together, you can achieve the goal or the task that you set out to do. A self-managed team is a cross-functional group who sees one project through its entire lifetime, and they manage themselves, right? They pass it down to the accounting department or marketing or whatever it is, and they get the job done from beginning to end. It stays within that department or that team until it is complete, and it's autonomous, right? They do it independently of the rest of the group. And then virtual, as we all know, there's many groups now and organizations that operate completely virtually, and they have teams all over the world, not even within the same country now. But of course, when you do have when you do operate in virtual teams, your communication needs to be excellent. Okay, there are advantages and disadvantages of teams. So, um, You have process gains and you have process losses. Some of the losses, and you know this from when you have to do group work, right? You know that when you do group work, sometimes there's conflict. You know that sometimes there's conformity where everyone just follows one person because it's easier to do that than argue, to go through that storming stage. There's social loafing, and you know what this is, even though you don't know the definition, and that is when one or two members do nothing. They sit back and let everyone do the work. And there's a term for that, and it's called social loafing. And the good news is that it's not you. That it does happen all over the place. The bad news is that it will continue to happen even when you are working full time in an organization. And then coordination is always difficult. Sometimes it's hard to coordinate a bunch of people getting work done, especially virtually, right? Especially virtually. And then there's process gains. Sometimes you're more accurate because you have a little piece of the puzzle and not the whole thing. You can sometimes get things done faster. You have better ideas because you're working as a group, and you obviously have more ideas. There's more people contributing, so there's a number of advantages as well. Okay, that was a short chapter, but listen, you deserve some short chapters because there will be longer ones, I promise. So this is about groups and teams. You got to know the difference between those two. You have to know these couple models here, and then advantages and disadvantages to working in groups and teams. As always, I hope you found that information useful. And if you have any questions, never ever hesitate to reach out and ask. Have yourself a great rest of the day.